All right, hello everyone. Welcome to Out of Spec Reviews. I am Max, and well, this is a follow-up from that video you might have seen a few weeks ago where Kyle and I were talking about buying a sub $25,000 cheap used electric vehicle. It's happening, and we listened to your comments. The first one we're looking at is the Chevy Bolt, the elephant in the room here. When it comes to a cheap, depreciated used electric car, well, the Chevy Bolt is an obvious deal. It is a lot of range, 259 miles of EPA estimated range on the newest ones. On this specific one, 237 for not a lot of money. So this specific one, we actually found a dealer locally who we told them what we're doing. We just said, hey, look, we want to look at one of your used Bolts. So here we have a 2019 LT Chevy Bolt. It's just the EV because they didn't have the EUV version at this point. But if we come in closer, we can kind of see that, you know, this is your Chevy Bolt. It is not the world's prettiest vehicle, in my opinion. It is obviously not the world's most technologically advanced vehicle, but you guys have spoken and we listened, and you can't argue with the numbers. What you're looking at for this specific one is they're asking somewhere in the neighborhood of $26,000. So if we were to buy it, we'd have to talk them down a bit. That said, I think that's pretty doable, not just for us because we're a YouTube channel, but for you too, because guess what? The new Chevy Bolt, because of that whole battery fire situation with LG Chem, has been discounted, and new models for the very base one start at $26,000 for a new one. So I think it's pretty reasonable to expect a 2019 used one with a little bit of mileage on it to be cheaper. So I think that's quite doable to get it under $25,000. Now to recap, why is under $25,000 so important? Well, that's because that is the price cap on the new tax credit going into effect in 2023, meaning that if you buy a used EV made at least 2 years ago or older, you can get up to $4,000 back off that purchase, basically taken off the purchase price, which makes used EVs even more of a value option, which is nice to see in this market where honestly cars haven't been depreciating that much. And so it's good to see examples like the Chevy Bolt where even if it's for somewhat unfortunate reasons, it's now depreciated. And those reasons I have high confidence are good reasons. I think, you know, yes, there were the LG Chem battery fire situation, there was a recall. GM's taking care of customers. They've replaced the battery. This one has one of the new batteries in it. So as far as we know, that issue is solved. Now, if there's fires again, well, I'm sure Chevy will be in some trouble, but right now they're focused on Ultium. So it seems like they've kind of fixed things up with the Bolt, and here we have it. So let's just kind of walk around the car, give a quick tour of it. So like I said, it's Bolt EV, it is not Bolt EUV, meaning this is the hatchback style. That said, the very new Bolt EUVs that are marginally more expensive, they're SUV styling. I think they have like marginally higher ground clearance. They're a bit larger, a little bit more space. They're still front wheel drive. So let's talk mechanics. This vehicle is a front wheel drive hatchback. It is running a motor on its front axle that is giving you 200 horsepower or about 266 pound-feet of torque. Now, that might not sound impressive compared to cars we've been looking at recently, like of course Kyle's Rivian or the Lucid Air that we've been testing, but keep in mind, this is an economy hatchback, and that gets us 0 to 60 and well under 7 seconds, faster than maybe some compact Mercedes electric SUVs. So that is really cool to see. It's actually comparable to my Mini Cooper, I think, maybe just a hair slower. But we'll see in the driving portion of this video where we test drive it. Now, we're not going to buy anything yet. We're going to look at several other used EVs. Stay tuned to this series because we're going to be looking at the other names in the room, your Nissan Leafs, your i3s, etc. On the note of the Leaf, by the way, one other thing about the Bolt, since we're talking mechanics, this one has the 60 kilowatt hour battery. So that's giving it 237 miles of EPA rated range. Now that battery pack is liquid cooled. So LG Chem issues aside, now that it's replaced and new, let's assume nothing bad happens with it, it's liquid cooled. You're gonna see less degradation, that means, than something like a Nissan Leaf, which is an air cooled battery. So that's awesome to see. Now, one thing I should note about the Bolt, if we kind of go around, is that I can show you the charging door here, right? On the topic of charging, that's another downside with the Bolt, in my opinion. So the Bolt does have DC fast charging. This is a 2019 model, like I said. It was introduced in the 2017 model year, and they didn't change it much. But here's the downside. So DC fast charging, the peak rate was only ever about 50 to 55 kilowatts. peak charging rate. So this is not a fast charger by any means. It wasn't when it came out, and nowadays next to, let's say, mass market 800 volt vehicles like the EGMP stuff, Hyundai Ioniq 5, etc., it's really outclassed. That's why I think part of why GM had to price cut it. So not only do you have a slow DC rate, this model has an onboard level 2 charger for AC, like at your house, charger limited to 7.2 kilowatts, not even 11 kilowatts. I think that was upgraded in the later model years. So not particularly fast to charge no matter which way you're charging, but they do have an onboard charger. So if we do end up buying the Bolt, I don't have an EVSE at my house. I'm actually going to be relying on DC fast charging. But if you were to really live with a Bolt, it might be a nice idea to have level 2. You're not going to see fast speeds, but it's got the level 2, it's got level 3, of course. So some of the EVs we're going to look at in this series might not necessarily have had DC fast charging, so it's nice at least that the Bolt offered it. So we can see if we kind of keep going around the vehicle here on the window that there's just some information. This is of course a dealer vehicle, 2019. And let's go back around the back. And this is one reason I like the Bolt. It's probably a reason you guys like the Bolt. It's a hatchback. And as someone who drives a 2-door Mini Cooper hatchback, I can just tell you hatchbacks are amazing. And that's still the case here because you get a lot of room. You get a surprising amount of storage capacity. It's basically 17 cubic feet with the rear seats. But if you fold those down, you're getting 57 cubic feet of storage capacity. So that was good when it came out. It's still good now. Because this was built from the ground up to be an EV, I think it's always been a very practical vehicle. And I should add a personal note. My grandma actually drives, I think, the debut model year, the 2017 Bolt. She's had it leased, then she bought out the lease. And since she's had it, she's loved it. At the time, she was looking at, a cheap EV, and there weren't many options on the market like there are now. There still aren't that many cheap options. The choice for her was this or a base Model 3, and a base Model 3 still would have been much more expensive. And let's face it, that's a rear-wheel drive sedan. That's not exactly a grandma spec vehicle. This hatchback is very practical in that regard. And if I open the back door, you can see that the load floor, or not the load floor, sorry, I mean the passenger floor, is flat. It's fully flat there. So it might be kind of dark to see on camera, but I think it's really cool that they basically provided you with that flat floor. They packaged the battery really well because this was never an ICE vehicle. It's always been an EV. So that's kind of just a walk around overview of the Bolt. We have it. Now Jordan and I are going to drive it, and we're just going to give you some quick impressions of it. And like I said, we're not buying anything yet. We're at Fowler Chevrolet here in Broomfield, Colorado, and I'm sure they're going to want us to move soon. But we're just looking at several EVs in this series. Thank you guys, by the way, Fowler Chevrolet, for letting us use this Bolt. This might be one of the vehicles we buy, but we have a couple more to look at in this series before we choose. So let's drive the Bolt, see how it is, before we move on to the future episodes of this series. But yeah, driving impressions, let's do it. Starting up the Chevy Bolt, which has a power button. Not every EV does. Especially some of these new ones like the Volvos don't. But I don't know. What do you think of having a power button in an EV, Jordan?
I think we should go away from that. Just driving this Mercedes SUV around today that has a power button also.
Yeah. And Tesla doesn't do that either, right? You just get in.
ID4, same thing. Just get in and go.
Yeah. That's the way it should be. Anyhow, one positive in this interior, you do have just a normal PRND selector. So that's really nice. And also on the PRND selector, there's an L for regenerative braking. So Bolt enthusiasts, this wouldn't be a nerdy EV if it didn't have a one pedal mode, even as an early EV, and this one certainly does, so that's great. And because we are nerds, why don't we just go into that high regen mode? Yep. It's one pedal driving. It's capable of it. So recuperation is there. We're just driving around the dealer, just test driving today, avoiding the world's largest pothole. I think that could eat your Miata.
Probably, yeah, bottom out.
We love Colorado Department of Transportation and how they maintain their roads.
All right, Max Verstappen, let's see what this thing can do.
All right. Oh, basically.
Some wheel spin there.
We got some wheel spin on our Michelin Energy Saver 215 tires.
My Miata has wider tires than this.
Yeah. However, they are energy efficient, and they're giving us, actually, it's estimating right now 279 miles of range. So that's kind of, I guess because when GM replaced the batteries, they probably put in the bigger 66 kilowatt hour pack.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
As opposed to the 60 that this launched with. So that's another plus of, LG and GM's problem being a win for customers once, they took care of you. Something I'm liking here is, I hope you can see it on the GoPro, this gauge cluster is very simple. Right now, for some reason, it's showing our tire pressure, but of course we can show trip, odometer, speed, whatever. A note on charging, like we mentioned in that earlier segment of the video, this is not a great charging story for an EV, but if you're not an egghead nerd like us, you probably don't care, right? You're charging at your house overnight. It's a liquid-cooled battery pack, so you're not going to see major degradation, even if you were to leave it outside for years on end. So that's great. And yeah, in terms of like that, okay, I gotta say on these tires, it's way too easy to get some wheel spin. I don't think that's a fault of the drivetrain. This is fairly aggressive from a stop in terms of giving you that power. And yes, once you get to 30 and 40, the limits of that 200 horsepower motor definitely present themselves. But the fact that I can basically just do wheel spins on my climate saving, my energy saving, low rolling resistance Michelin tires is just hilarious. So if you want to be a drift god, well, front wheel drive Chevy Bolt, honestly, maybe not the world's worst choice.
Yeah, it's not that low of horsepower. When you compare it to like a Model 3, it's less power and torque, but when you compare it to other things we deem as hot hatchbacks, it's hot hatchback territory as far as power. So I don't think that's a thing to really complain about.
Yeah, and I haven't touched the brakes once. So in this low setting, the regenerative braking is really doing its job. And there's paddles on the steering wheel, way before Hyundai and Kia were doing this on all their cars, to actually let you really like up the aggression of that regen in real time. So I think this is a very one-pedal driving friendly car.
Now, one thing to note with an older Bolt versus a new one, this doesn't have adaptive cruise control, even in the maxed out package. So you are sacrificing that versus a new one. Because a lot of people are comparing new Bolt versus old Bolt, including our friend Dominic Yoni, who many of you guys may know from Inside EVs. He is literally in this debate right now. I think he's leaning towards new. But the price is fairly close. You can definitely undercut the new Bolt with the older Bolt pricing, but then what are you sacrificing? In this case, it's the driver assistance. Now, to get a new Bolt spec'd with Super Cruise, then you're upping the price even more. So then that disparity increases.
Yeah, and I would say that's really the only functional thing, right? It's that fancier driver assistance tech, and of course the new styling, if that speaks to you more. They kind of facelifted it, but like functionally, for us eggheads, nerds, numbers guys, this is the same car. Basically, like we're getting that 274 miles of estimated range. We're getting still very similar mechanics. They never changed the motor setup on this car. They never gave it a limited slip differential option or torque vectoring. None of that. Like, this is the Bolt, just been the Bolt.
The NVH, the noise, vibration, harshness, is not bad at all. The material feels are fine. Like, it's obviously cheap. It's economy. Yeah. But they kind of took, similar to the Ford Maverick approach, with some of this like interesting plastic. It's not just boring, crappy plastic.
It's not at all, like the new Mazda or Honda products, which I think are kind of like they're upping the game. They're kind of going that luxury space. This is nowhere near that. But like you said, it's interesting. Like, it's kind of a cool design. I don't know. There's cool patterns going on in here.
Yeah. It's fine. And the seats are two-tone. I mean, there's cool things about that. And obviously, when you're looking at used vehicles, the options may change. You're not going to find everything with the same amount of options. But that is one way to kind of get a better deal sometimes, because the options aren't as expensive as they would be on a new vehicle, because they're just kind of lumped into the price, which may adjust the price a little bit. But if you're looking at a used vehicle, try to find one with some of the options you may not look for in a new vehicle because of the price.
And I like that. I think Chevy always kept the options on the Bolt simple. Like, if you got a well-outfitted one, like this one is just an LT package, but it has the climate, it has heated seats. There's a heated steering wheel.
So this does have the premium package, which is cool.
Yeah. Heated steering wheel with the premium package. You got CarPlay and Android Auto, I think, standard on basically all the Bolts that have been made, which is really smart. I think it's a great approach, because this is not an OS to write home about. It's not the most responsive in the world, but like we've been saying, it's simple, it's easy. You really don't have that many options here. This is a great EV for both, the eggheads and EV nerds among us who want the best bang for the buck, and just for people who don't even know what an EV is, and just, let's say you want to save grandma some money. this is a car for her. I recommended this to my grandma when it was new, and she still likes hers. Yeah, the beauty of Bolt is they never really focused on trying to be a spec killer or have these fancy features. And in some ways that makes this, it's always been a less desirable vehicle for those reasons, but those are the same things that's made it an affordable vehicle. Now I have to say, turning radius is fine. It's just average for a small car, but it is a small car. So if you were coming out of, let's say, your old RAV4, this is probably going to feel pretty nimble.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then again,
still tire spin at 30 miles an hour.
I'm not even in the sport mode, which let's just enable that.
There we go.
Oh, so that's just changing my throttle sensitivity. It's electronic steering, of course. Maybe it firmed that up a bit. I don't think so. I think it's just changing the accelerator feel.
Yeah.
But yeah, and yeah, like Jordan was saying, it won't be a road trip king. It's not a Tesla, it doesn't have supercharging. It never had the fast CCS DC charging, but it didn't need any of that. Plenty of people have been happy with this. This just wouldn't be a cross-country vehicle, but if you were making you could do a day trip where you were going, let's say, within a 100-mile radius comfortably in this car and pack, 3 of your close friends and their gear probably, and there's a decent amount of space. It's a hatchback.
Yeah. So how do you feel overall as price point versus the car?
Price point versus the car, this is the first one in the series that we're looking at, right? So to come are some of the other options here. But right off the bat, I see why everyone was commenting. Check out the Bolt. Of course I knew about the Bolt, but driving it again, reminding myself how it feels, I am just, I'm happy with it.
It's one of the prominent players in the used market. You see a lot of Leafs, a lot of Bolts.
Yeah.
Other cars that were deemed kind of California compliance cars are still existing, and they're still at a cheaper price, but they're less common because they made far fewer of them. They've made a lot of Bolts in the last 5 model years, and that's what we probably will see more and more of on the used market.
Yes, this has just been a used king in a used market that has been so wacky these last few years. It's nice to see the Bolt depreciating somewhat from what was already a pretty attractive price at the time. And of course, Colorado, if this is, let's say, hypothetically, it'd be anticlimactic, but let's say this is the car that we choose and that Kyle buys this and this is what I'm driving for a few months in the Colorado winter. There's going to be some questions, right? Like these energy saver tires, might have to make a trip to Costco, get some winners, and see how it holds up. Of course, all-wheel drive was never offered on this. That's a very Colorado thing. There's no heat pump, so even though it's good range, what's that going to hold up with in the cold? How much will the climate affect that if I have heat on? So those are open questions.
Yeah, a lot of things to remain answered, but that's the whole point of this series is buying a car and seeing what it's like to really live with it.
Current consumption, 2.7 miles a kilowatt hour. I've been driving normally with a few of those launches.
Yep.
It's all Jordan's fault. He spurred me on.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been a reasonably efficient, it's the Bolt. Thank you everybody for watching the first part of this series, and let us know the next obvious pick. Yes, we looked at the Bolt, we did it, we listened to you, and this might be what we end up with.
Well, I'd be fine with it. I mean,
yeah. Yeah, I don't know. That said, of course, the e-Golf excites the dynamic car nerd in me who likes Volkswagens. That i3 excites the technologist in me who likes that's carbon fiber and rear wheel drive and all that. So this is not an exciting car, but it's a control.
Yeah.
In scientific terms, this is a control, and it's a pretty darn good one. Okay, now that we've driven the Bolt, it's time for a little bit of buyer's advice when you're actually looking for a used one, which we ourselves might be, but just some quick advice for y'all who might be in the market yourselves. So things to know about the Bolt EV. Well, I would recommend looking at 2021 or older ones for the best depreciation, especially on that used market. So the new price of a Bolt is just under $26,000. So keep that in mind, because currently the used market, we'll get to that later in this video looking at some other Bolts, hasn't exactly adjusted to that. And it should, because a used car should be cheaper than a new car. So keep that in mind. And in terms of trims for Bolt, you probably want to be looking at LT because the standard equipment was pretty good. There's standard CarPlay, that same motor, same battery capacity, 60 kilowatt hours, now upgraded to 66 courtesy of that GM recall, which I think is a huge benefit to anyone buying a Bolt. It means you're going to realize that higher range and you have a new battery warranty. And don't be afraid of necessarily buying a high mileage Bolt, because From what I could find, there's not that many known issues with them. Of course, yes, you'll have your standard tire wear. The interior and the seats can, of course, be worn down over time. But in terms of the mechanics of the car, pretty solid, aside from, of course, that original fire issue with the battery pack, which is being replaced courtesy of Chevy. So once you get your new battery pack, you have a new warranty. It honestly makes it a super compelling value proposition, either used or new. The new ones supposedly are fixed and all have that larger battery pack, but if you're buying used, well, you can still get that tax credit in 2023, and you're getting a new battery pack with a new warranty. In terms of trims, the new ones come in either an 1LT or 2LT trim. The old ones came in either LT or Premier trims. And most of the differences are things you would expect in a kind of cost upgrade. You basically get nicer leather seats, but hey, if you're vegan, maybe you prefer the base model. There's some other things like an upgradable audio system. There are optional driver assistance technologies, like there's just a parking camera with the driver assistance pack, and there's a comfort and convenience one that has a heated steering wheel and heated seats. Now, being in Colorado, I think that the one, if we go with a Bolt, the one we go with will probably have to have that comfort and convenience one, because the heated seats, heated steering wheel, those are important here. And if we do go with it, we'll of course let you know how range is, because the Bolt was never offered with a heat pump. The new ones still don't have one. But yeah, big benefits towards all the new Bolts having that big upgraded 66 kilowatt hour battery pack. That is awesome to see. But that's basically the buyer's advice. It's pretty simple. You should just probably get an LT trim. If you need the heated seats and heated steering wheel for your climate, option that in. If you really want leather, you can get a Premier. But those are, of course, you know, they were $4,000 more expensive originally. They're still more expensive now in the used market. So I would just consider looking at that LT trim. If you're like me and you just need CarPlay, well, that's standard on all the Bolts. However, there was a DC fast charging option on the Bolt, especially early Bolts. It became standardized later on, but some early Bolts might not necessarily have DC fast charging. In other markets like Canada, this was standard. In the US, it wasn't. It was actually a $750 option package. So before you buy your used Bolt, make sure it has that two-prong extra add-on connector for DC fast charging, because it might not necessarily have it. Also, you will need to provide your own level 2 charger. It comes with a 120 volt, three-prong outlet, but it doesn't have the 240 volt outlet included with the car. So that is an extra cost you need to consider. Looking at the used market for Bolts beyond our area, beyond this, just the specific dealer with the Bolt we looked at, kind of seeing if we can find basically a better value. Because of course, we get a Rivian, we can tow anything, we can go cross country. So let's see if we can get a better deal on a Bolt. So what I'm doing is using our zip code for a Chevy Bolt within a, let's say, 500-mile radius. Our max price here is, of course, $25,000. So with those dialed in, let's just search. And I'm looking at Bolt EV. If Bolt EV pops up, great, but because that's more recent, I'm predicting it's gonna be more expensive, and we're trying to stay on a budget here. So I'm seeing some Premiers right off the bat through Carvana. I'm also seeing a dealer LT vehicle. So LT, that base spec, still pretty good. It's 2017 and it's got some miles on it. So it's $24,000 even at its asked price, but considering the new Bolts are being asked for just under $26,000, I think there's room to go down on this one. High mileage, not necessarily something to worry about. 36,000 miles on a 2017 model year vehicle is actually not a lot either. So I wouldn't say that this is a crazy bad deal, but I would definitely get it closer to the 20 grand than that 24 grand it's sitting at now. Looking at Carvana, we can see there are some better deals to be had. The Premier trims, so those are still under $25,000. There's an LT here with also really not that many miles on it for just under $23,000. We can also see pending sales, and of course pending sales aren't going to be useful for ones we can buy right now, but it kind of shows you where the market is, and it shows you that generally for higher mileage debut model year 2017, 2018 Bolts, well, people are paying just over 20 grand. So not that much money in the grand scheme of things, especially when you consider that until recently, the used market hadn't adjusted that much. It's slowly starting to adjust, and it still hasn't entirely. So keep an eye on that. The one package you probably will want to look for, you want to make sure the Bolt has, is that DC fast charging. Most North American Bolts do. There's some, however, that don't. So do look, like let's look on this Carvana one. This is the 2017 one, purchase in progress here. So we can't buy it, but we'll just look at the specs to see, make sure that this one has DC fast charging on it. So there is that open recall. That's of course the battery. Big benefit of these used Bolts is you're basically getting a new battery pack, and it's the new large capacity 66 kilowatt hour one. So used or new, the reason I'm equating these so much is because it's really, the battery is the most expensive component by far on an electric vehicle, especially one like the Bolt, which had a pretty big battery capacity for what it was. So when you consider that you're getting a new battery with a new warranty, even on used ones, that's why this car is looking like such a deal. And you know, that's just incredibly compelling. So a Carvana interface here, I'm not a huge fan of. We can look at the photos here though, and there should be an easy way to look at the charging door. Oh, yep, it has that orange cover over the CCS Sport, so it does have those extra 2 pins for DC fast charging. Great to confirm that. So good to see that. Of course, CarPlay, those tech features, they're all standard. This is not leather seats because it's LT, but I don't care about that. The one thing I might look for in a Colorado climate would be heated seats, the climate package basically with the heated seats and heated steering wheel. And let's see if this actually has that. We can just easily look through the pictures here. Actually, let me go back to this steering wheel. Yep, this is a heated steering wheel, so great. This could be a Colorado spec Bolt. So good to see that, you know, well under that $25,000 cap, you're still able to get Bolts for quite cheap. Man, that's quite a good deal with that price cut that GM did and those new batteries under warranty. I see why the Bolt is a good deal. So strong contender on the short list, but of course there are more cheap used EVs to look at later in this series, which I will be doing along with Jordan, Kyle, whoever can kind of tag along, but we've got more to look at. Stay tuned to that. Thank you for watching Out of Spec Reviews. I've been Max.